I stared at the termination letter in my hands, the company letterhead bearing my own last name mocking me from the top of the page. Effective immediately, Sarah Chen is relieved of all duties at Chen Industries due to performance inadequacies and insubordination. My father's signature sat at the bottom, cold and final. Pack your things and leave, my stepmother Linda said from the doorway of what had been my office for 3 years. Her manicured nails tapped against the glass as she watched me with undisguised satisfaction. Security will escort you out in 10 minutes. Behind her stood my half-sister Jessica, barely containing her glee. At 22, she was 2 years younger than me, but had somehow been promoted to vice president, while I remained stuck as a junior analyst despite my MBA and 3 years of 60-hour weeks. Don't forget to return your company laptop, Jessica added with false sweetness. We wouldn't want any misunderstandings about proprietary information. The irony wasn't lost on me. In my previous life, this exact scene had played out on a rainy Tuesday in March. I had died 6 months later in a car accident, broken and defeated, never knowing that Jessica had been systematically sabotaging my work and that Linda had been feeding my father lies about my attitude problems. But death, it turned out, wasn't the end. I had awakened on my 18th birthday, memories of my future intact, and I'd spent the last 6 years preparing for this moment. Of course, I said calmly, closing my laptop and placing it on the desk. I had already copied everything I needed months ago. I'll be out of your way. As security walked me through the lobby I'd entered every morning for 3 years, I caught sight of my reflection in the glass doors. Where others might see a young woman humiliated and cast out, I saw someone who had just been freed to execute a plan 6 years in the making. The rain that had been threatening all morning finally began to fall as I stood on the sidewalk outside Chen Industries, but I didn't feel defeated. I felt liberated. My phone buzzed with a text from my college roommate, Amy. Coffee? You sound like you need it. She didn't know about my termination yet, but Amy had always been perceptive. In my first life, I had been too proud to accept help from friends. This time would be different. But first, I had a more important call to make. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I had memorized but never dared to use in my previous life. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed. Victoria Chen speaking. The voice was crisp, professional, with just a hint of the accent that betrayed her origins in Shanghai. Grandmother, I said quietly. It's Sarah. I think it's time we talked. The abuse had started the day my mother died. I was 12, and my father had remarried within 8 months to Linda, a woman who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to her daughter's inheritance. In my first life, I had endured 15 years of systematic emotional torture, watching as Jessica received every advantage while I was given scraps. Linda was a master manipulator. She never left marks or raised her voice in front of my father. Instead, she employed a death by 1,000 cuts, forgetting to include me in family dinners, losing my permission slips for school trips, and constantly comparing me unfavorably to Jessica. Your sister is so naturally gifted, she would say. It's such a shame genetics can be so uneven. Jessica learned from the best. She would borrow my clothes and return them damaged, copy my homework and then claim I had cheated off her, and worst of all, she had somehow convinced my father that I was jealous and vindictive. When I tried to defend myself, I was labeled as difficult and unable to take responsibility. The financial abuse was more subtle, but just as devastating. My father, who owned a mid-sized manufacturing company, had put Jessica through private school and paid for her to attend Northwestern University. When it came time for my education, suddenly money was tight. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through state school and graduated with debt, while Jessica emerged from college debt-free with a useless communications degree and a guaranteed job at the family company. But the worst part was how my father enabled it all. In my previous life, I had never understood how the man who used to read me bedtime stories could become so cold and distant. I spent years trying to earn back his love, working myself to exhaustion at his company, only to watch him promote Jessica over me time and time again. It was only after I died and was reborn with my memories intact that I understood the full scope of the manipulation. Linda hadn't just poisoned my father against me. She had systematically isolated me from the one person who could have helped, my paternal grandmother, Victoria Chen. Victoria had built her own business empire after immigrating to the United States in the 1960s. She had started with a small restaurant and parlayed it into a chain of successful establishments, then diversified into real estate and technology investments. By the time I was born, she was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But Linda had convinced my father that his mother was a toxic influence who would spoil me with her money and make me entitled. She orchestrated a bitter falling out between them when I was 13, using my father's grief over my mother's death and his guilt about remarrying so quickly. I was forbidden from seeing my grandmother, and Linda made sure that any attempts at contact were intercepted. In my first life, I never knew that Victoria had tried to reach out to me. She had sent letters, gifts, even college tuition money that Linda had intercepted and returned. My grandmother had died alone 3 years ago, having given up hope of ever reconciling with her son or meeting her granddaughter. But this time, Victoria was still alive. This time, I knew the truth. And this time, I was going to use every advantage at my disposal to destroy the people who had stolen my childhood, my family, and my futures. The decision to fight back had crystallized the moment I read my termination letter. In my first life, I had accepted defeat, internalized the message that I was worthless, and spent my final months in a spiral of depression and self-doubt. But armed with knowledge of the future and the understanding of how deeply I had been betrayed, I felt something I had never experienced before: righteous anger. That evening, I sat in my small apartment, the same cramped studio I had rented in my first life, while Jessica lived in a luxury downtown loft paid for by our father, and outlined my plan. It was audacious, requiring perfect timing and execution, but it was also beautifully simple in its justice. I would take everything they valued and make it mine. First, I needed to establish contact with Victoria. In my previous life, I had been too proud and too brainwashed to seek help from anyone, convinced that asking for assistance was a sign of weakness. This time, I understood that refusing help was just another form of self-sabotage. Second, I would need to position myself at Meridian Dynamics, Chen Industries' biggest competitor. In my first life, I had been vaguely aware of the company but had never paid it much attention. After my death, however, I had done my research. Meridian was everything Chen Industries wasn't: innovative, forward-thinking, and hungry for market share. More importantly, they had been trying to poach talent from Chen Industries for years. Third, I would systematically dismantle everything my father had built, using my insider knowledge of the company's weaknesses, upcoming contracts, and strategic plans to give Meridian every advantage. It wouldn't be enough to simply succeed. I needed to ensure that Chen Industries failed spectacularly. The plan was ruthless, but then again, so had been the treatment I had endured for 15 years. I called Victoria again the next morning. This time, I was ready to tell her everything. "I was wondering when you would call," she said after I introduced myself again. Her voice was warm but cautious. "Your father has made it very clear that you want nothing to do with me." "That's not true," I said, and then I began to talk. I told her about Linda's manipulation, about the intercepted letters and returned money, about years of emotional abuse and systematic exclusion. I told her about Jessica's sabotage and my father's willful blindness to what was happening in his own home. Victoria listened in silence, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "I tried so hard to reach you," she finally said, and I could hear the pain in her voice. I thought perhaps David was right, that you had chosen their side." "Never," I said fiercely. I never even knew there were sides until it was too late." "It's not too late now," Victoria said, and I could hear the steel that had built an empire creeping into her voice. "When can you come to see me?" Victoria lived in a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, and as I stood in her marble foyer 2 days later, I finally understood what I had been denied. This wasn't just wealth. It was legacy. The walls were covered with photographs spanning decades. Victoria with politicians and celebrities, Victoria at groundbreaking ceremonies, Victoria receiving humanitarian awards. My mother appeared in dozens of photos, and in several I could see myself as a small child, happy and loved. "You look exactly like your mother," Victoria said, leading me into a sitting room that probably cost more than I made in a year. She would be so proud of the woman you've become. I haven't become anything yet, I said, but I want to. I want to learn everything you can teach me. Victoria smiled, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. We talked for hours. She told me about building her first restaurant with nothing but determination and a $5,000 loan, about the discrimination she had faced as an Asian woman in business, about the sacrifices she had made to create something lasting. In return, I told her about my plans for Meridian Dynamics and my intention to destroy Chen Industries. Revenge is a dish best served cold, Victoria said when I finished outlining my strategy. But business success is a dish best served hot. Focus on building something magnificent, and your father's company will collapse under its own incompetence. I want to do both, I admitted. I want them to know that I beat them. Victoria studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Then we'll do both, but we'll do it right. She made a phone call while I watched the sunset over the lake. When she hung up, she was smiling. I just spoke to Marcus Webb, the CEO of Meridian Dynamics. You have an interview Monday morning for the position of Senior Strategic Analyst. Your resume, which I may have embellished slightly, has already been forwarded to him. Grandmother, I can't just... You can, she said firmly, and you will. But understand that everything after this moment will be earned. I can open doors, but you must walk through them on your own merit. I felt a surge of excitement and terror in equal measure. This was really happening. There's something else, Victoria said, and her tone became more serious. Your father's company is in more trouble than you know. The Morrison contract that Jessica has been managing, she's been cutting corners on quality to increase profit margins. It's going to blow up within the next 6 months. I stared at her. In my first life, Chen Industries had lost the Morrison contract due to quality issues, but I had never known Jessica was responsible. My father had blamed the failure on market conditions and used it as justification for another round of cost-cutting that had ultimately decimated the company's reputation. How do you know about Morrison? I asked. Victoria's smile was sharp. Because Morrison Industries is one of my investments. John Morrison is a dear friend, and he's been keeping me informed about the irregularities in Chen Industries' deliveries. He was planning to terminate the contract quietly, but perhaps we can arrange for a more public end to their relationship. The scope of what my grandmother was offering began to sink in. This wasn't just about getting me a job at a competing company. This was about leveraging an entire network of relationships and resources to achieve total victory. Why are you doing this for me? I asked. Victoria's expression softened. Because you're my granddaughter, and I've lost too many years with you already. Because your mother would never forgive me if I didn't help you claim what's rightfully yours. And because, frankly, I've been wanting to destroy your stepmother for 15 years, and now I finally have the perfect weapon to do it. She paused, then added, You? Monday morning arrived gray and cold, but I felt electric with possibility as I walked into the Meridian Dynamics building. The company occupied 40 floors of a gleaming downtown skyscraper, and everything about it screamed success and innovation. The lobby was filled with young, ambitious-looking people, and the energy was palpable. Marcus Webb was nothing like my father. Where David Chen was traditional and conservative, Marcus was dynamic and forward-thinking. He was in his 50s but moved with the energy of someone half his age, and when he spoke about the company's vision, his enthusiasm was infectious. Victoria tells me you have some unique insights into our competition, he said after we had discussed my qualifications for 20 minutes. I worked at Chen Industries for 3 years, I said carefully. I'm familiar with their operations, their client relationships, and their strategic planning processes. Marcus leaned back in his chair. And what's your assessment of their current position? I thought about Jessica's shortcuts, Linda's interference in business decisions, and my father's increasing reliance on outdated processes. They're vulnerable, I said. They've been coasting on reputation and legacy relationships, but they're not innovating. Their quality control has declined, their customer service is inconsistent, and their management structure is problematic. Problematic how? I chose my words carefully. Decision-making is concentrated in too few hands, and those hands aren't always making decisions based on sound business principles. They're susceptible to disruption by a more agile competitor. Marcus smiled. Victoria mentioned you have a particularly detailed understanding of their upcoming challenges. The Morrison contract, I said. They're going to lose it within 6 months due to quality issues. It represents 12% of their annual revenue. Marcus's eyebrows rose. You seem very confident about that timeline. I've seen the delivery reports, I said, which was true. In my previous life, I had been the one trying to flag the quality problems, only to be told by Jessica that I was being unnecessarily alarmist. This time, I would let her hang herself with her own rope. Well, Marcus said, standing and extending his hand. Welcome to Meridian Dynamics, Sarah. I think you're going to fit in very well here. As I shook his hand, I felt the first domino falling. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. My first month at Meridian was a revelation. After years of being treated as incompetent at Chen Industries, I was finally in an environment where my ideas were valued and my contributions recognized. Marcus assigned me to the strategic planning team, and within weeks, I was presenting analysis that impressed even the most senior executives. But I wasn't just excelling for my own satisfaction. Every piece of intelligence I gathered, every strategic insight I developed was carefully calibrated to position Meridian for maximum advantage when Chen Industries began its inevitable collapse. I knew, for instance, that Chen Industries would be bidding on a major contract with Harrison Manufacturing in 2 months. In my previous life, they had won that contract primarily because their bid came in 15% lower than Meridian's. This time, armed with precise knowledge of their pricing strategy, I was able to help Meridian craft a bid that was both competitive and profitable. I also knew that Chen Industries was planning to expand into the Southeast market, a move that would stretch their resources thin and leave them vulnerable in their core Midwest territory. I provided Meridian's business development team with detailed analysis of the Southeast market, allowing them to establish a presence there first and force Chen Industries into a costly market battle they couldn't win. Most importantly, I was building relationships and establishing myself as an indispensable member of the Meridian team. I worked late, volunteered for additional projects, and made sure that every presentation I gave exceeded expectations. By the end of my second month, Marcus was including me in senior leadership meetings, and I could sense that bigger opportunities were coming. Victoria and I met for dinner every Sunday, and she provided guidance that went far beyond business strategy. She taught me about corporate politics, about reading people and situations, about the importance of building alliances and managing perceptions. More than that, she gave me something I had never had: unconditional support and belief in my abilities. Your father called me last week, she told me over dinner in early June. I looked up from my salmon, surprised. Really? What did he want? He wanted to know if I had anything to do with his recent difficulties. I smiled. Chen Industries had lost 2 major clients in the past month, both to Meridian Dynamics. And what did you tell him? I told him that his difficulties were entirely self-inflicted, and that perhaps if he had treated his daughter with respect, she wouldn't have been forced to seek opportunities elsewhere. You told him I work for Meridian? Victoria's smile was sharp. I may have mentioned it, along with the fact that you've been promoted twice already and are being considered for the strategic planning director position. The strategic planning director position was news to me, but from the gleam in Victoria's eyes, I suspected it might not be news for much longer. You're playing a longer game than just revenge, aren't you? I asked. My dear girl, Victoria said, revenge is just the appetizer. The main course is building something that will last for generations. The Morrison contract termination came exactly when I had predicted. Jessica had continued cutting corners on quality, convinced that Morrison's complaints were just negotiating tactics. When Morrison Industries announced they were ending their relationship with Chen Industries and awarding their business to Meridian Dynamics instead, the shockwaves rippled through the entire industry. I was in Marcus's office when the call came in from John Morrison himself. Marcus, my boy. Morrison's voice boomed through the speakerphone. Victoria Chen tells me your new strategic planning director had some insights about timing this transition. I felt a flutter of excitement. Strategic planning director, Victoria had indeed been playing a longer game. Sarah has been invaluable, Marcus said, glancing at me with approval. Her analysis of market conditions has been spot on. Well, give her my compliments. This transition is going to save me millions in the long run. Chen Industries was becoming unreliable, and frankly, David Chen's attitude toward quality control was becoming unacceptable. After Morrison hung up, Marcus turned to me with a grin. Congratulations, Director Chen. I hope you're ready for significantly more responsibility. The promotion came with a corner office, a 60% salary increase, and a staff of 12 analysts. At 24, I was the youngest director in Meridian's history, and the business press took notice. Within a week, I had been featured in Forbes' 30 under 30 inches list and interviewed by 3 trade publications. More importantly, my new position gave me access to Meridian's highest level strategic planning, which meant I could orchestrate Chen Industries' destruction with surgical precision. The first target was the Henderson Group contract, a major manufacturing deal that Chen Industries desperately needed to replace the lost Morrison revenue. In my previous life, Chen Industries had won this contract by promising an impossible delivery timeline, then failed spectacularly to meet their commitments. This time, I made sure that Meridian not only bid competitively, but also demonstrated superior project management capabilities. When Henderson awarded the contract to Meridian, it was another devastating blow to Chen Industries' already shaky finances. But I wasn't satisfied with simply winning contracts. I wanted Linda and Jessica to understand exactly who was responsible for their downfall. I started small. Industry publications began running anonymous quotes about Chen Industries' internal management challenges and questions about succession planning. I made sure that Jessica's failures on the Morrison account were discussed in detail at trade conferences, always presented as cautionary tales about the importance of maintaining quality standards. The psychological warfare escalated when I arranged for Meridian to host a client appreciation event at the same hotel where Chen Industries held their annual board meeting. I made sure the event was scheduled for the same week, and I personally designed the invitation list to include every major client that Chen Industries had lost to us. The message was clear. Meridian Dynamics was not just a competitor. We were the future, and Chen Industries was the past. Victoria attended the event as my guest, and the sight of her chatting with clients and competitors sent shockwaves through the Chen Industries delegation. My father looked stunned. Linda appeared ready to faint, and Jessica spent the entire evening frantically making phone calls. But the best part came when Marcus announced my promotion to Vice President of Strategic Development, effective immediately. At 25, I was now the youngest VP in Meridian's history, with a salary that exceeded what my father made as CEO of his own company. Some of you may know that Sarah began her career at Chen Industries, Marcus said during his speech. We're grateful they didn't recognize her potential because their loss has been our tremendous gain. The applause was thunderous, and as I stood to acknowledge it, I made sure to catch my father's eye across the room. The look on his face was everything I had hoped for: shock, recognition, and the dawning realization that he had made a catastrophic mistake. After the event, Linda cornered me in the ladies' room. "You think you're so smart," she hissed, her composure finally cracking. "But family is family, and blood is thicker than water." I smiled at her reflection in the mirror as I reapplied my lipstick. "You're absolutely right, Linda. Blood is thicker than water. That's why my grandmother and I have become so close." Her face went white. "Your grandmother is a vindictive old woman who built an empire from nothing and raised a son who was capable of loving and being loved until you poisoned him against his own family," I interrupted. "My grandmother is worth more than Chen Industries ever will be, and she's taught me that success is the best revenge." I capped my lipstick and turned to face her directly. "But you know what's even better than success? Justice. And justice is what you're going to get." Linda tried to maintain her superior expression, but I could see the fear creeping in around the edges. "What are you talking about?" "You'll see," I said pleasantly. "Very soon." The final phase of my plan began to unfold in September, exactly 18 months after I had been fired from Chen Industries. By then, Chen Industries had lost 30% of its client base to Meridian Dynamics, and their stock price had fallen to half its previous value. My father was scrambling to keep the company afloat, and industry analysts were openly speculating about potential bankruptcy. But I wasn't finished. The Henderson Group contract failure provided the perfect opportunity for the coup de grace. In my previous life, Chen Industries had taken on the Henderson project despite being understaffed and undercapitalized, leading to delays, cost overruns, and ultimately, a lawsuit that nearly destroyed the company. This time, I made sure that Henderson came to Meridian instead, but I also ensured that Chen Industries' failure would be even more spectacular. Working through my network of contacts, a network that Victoria had helped me cultivate over the past year, I arranged for three of Chen Industries' other major clients to discover concerns about the company's financial stability at exactly the same moment. Within the span of 48 hours, Chen Industries lost four major contracts representing nearly half of their remaining revenue. The business press called it the fastest corporate collapse in recent memory. But they didn't know the half of it. While my father was dealing with client defections and financial catastrophe, I was preparing to deliver the final blow. Using intelligence I had gathered about Chen Industries' intellectual property and client relationships, I had convinced Marcus to make an acquisition offer, not for the entire company, but for its most valuable assets and contracts. The offer was brilliant in its cruelty. We would purchase Chen Industries' client list, their most profitable product lines, and their manufacturing equipment for 30 cents on the dollar. We would also offer employment to their most talented employees, everyone except the Chen family members, of course. It was a hostile takeover disguised as a rescue mission, and it would leave my father with nothing but debt and empty buildings. Marcus presented the offer to Chen Industries' board in early October, and the vote was unanimous. Faced with imminent bankruptcy, the board had no choice but to accept Meridian's terms. The news made the front page of the business section. Meridian Dynamics acquires Chen Industries assets in fire sale. But the real victory came 3 days later, when Marcus called a press conference to announce Meridian's expansion plans. Standing beside him at the podium, wearing a tailored black suit that cost more than Jessica's monthly salary, I felt the satisfying weight of complete triumph. "I'm pleased to announce," Marcus said to the assembled reporters, "that Sarah Chen will be taking over as president and COO of Meridian Dynamics, effective January 1st. At 26, she will be one of the youngest corporate officers in the industry, and her promotion reflects not only her exceptional capabilities, but also her instrumental role in our recent growth." The questions came fast and furious. How did I feel about surpassing my father's company? Was this a case of revenge of the daughter? What did my family think about my success? I answered each question with poise and professionalism, but inside I was savoring every moment. "I believe in meritocracy," I said when asked about my rapid rise. "Companies succeed when they recognize and reward talent, regardless of family connections or personal relationships. I'm grateful that Meridian Dynamics gave me opportunities based on my abilities rather than my last name." The not-so-subtle dig at Chen Industries' nepotistic practices was noted by every reporter in the room. "As for my family," I continued, "I hope they understand that this isn't personal. This is simply business. The market has spoken, and it's chosen innovation and excellence over tradition and complacency." After the press conference, Victoria was waiting for me in my new corner office, an office that was larger and more elegant than my father's had ever been. "Your mother would be so proud," she said, embracing me with tears in her eyes. "You've accomplished more in 2 years than most people achieve in a lifetime." "We're not finished yet," I said. "Marcus is planning to retire in 3 years. When he does, I'll be in position to become CEO." Victoria smiled. "And then?" "And then we build something that will last forever." The final piece of poetic justice came 6 months later when Chen Industries officially filed for bankruptcy. The company that had borne my family name for 30 years was dissolved, its remaining assets sold off to pay creditors. My father lost everything: his company, his house, his savings, and his reputation. The business community, which had once respected him as a steady if unspectacular leader, now viewed him as a cautionary tale about the importance of succession planning and family management. Linda, faced with financial ruin and social humiliation, had what she called a nervous breakdown, but what everyone else recognized as a strategic retreat to her sister's house in Florida. Jessica, her MBA suddenly worthless without family connections to back it up, took a job as a junior marketing coordinator at a small firm in Milwaukee, the same type of entry-level position I had been forced to accept after graduation. But my father's real punishment was understanding exactly what he had lost. 3 months after the bankruptcy, he called me. Sarah, his voice was barely above a whisper. I, I need to talk to you. We met at a coffee shop near his new apartment, a modest one-bedroom in a complex that rented mostly to college students and recent divorces. He looked older than his 58 years, his hair completely gray and his face lined with stress and regret. I know what I did to you, he said without preamble. I know how she poisoned me against you, against my own mother. I know how I failed you. I sipped my latte and waited. This was his moment to speak. I would not make it easy for him. Victoria told me about the letters, about the money for college. Linda, she convinced me that mother was trying to manipulate you, that accepting her help would make you entitled and ungrateful. She said you didn't want anything to do with the family business anyway. And you believed her without ever asking me? Yes. His voice broke slightly. I believed her because it was easier than admitting that I had remarried too quickly, that I had brought someone into our home who didn't love you the way your mother did. I believed her because I was a coward. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or self-pity, but all I saw was genuine remorse and exhaustion. Jessica, he continued, I know she sabotaged your work. I know she was responsible for the Morrison account failure. I know she was never qualified for the positions I gave her. And yet you fired me for insubordination. Because Linda convinced me that you were trying to undermine Jessica out of jealousy. Because I was weak and foolish, and I failed the most important job I ever had, being your father. We sat in silence for several minutes. Around us, college students typed on laptops and young professionals grabbed coffee between meetings. Life continued, indifferent to our family drama. I don't expect forgiveness, my father finally said. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I understand what I've lost. Not just the company. That was just money and ego. I've lost my daughter. I've lost my mother. I've lost any chance of ever making this right. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. This was what I had wanted, his complete acknowledgement of his failures and their consequences. But actually, hearing it felt less triumphant than I had expected. You're right, I said quietly. You can't make this right. The damage is too deep and too extensive. I spent 15 years trying to earn your love and respect, and you gave it freely to someone who hadn't earned it and didn't deserve it. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. But, I continued, I want you to know that I've found something better than your approval. I've found my own worth, my own family, and my own purpose. I'm successful not because of you, or in spite of you, but independent of you entirely. I stood to leave, then paused. Oh, and Dad? Linda left because she thought she could find another wealthy man to support her. Jessica is dating a stockbroker in Milwaukee who doesn't know about her family's bankruptcy. They didn't leave because they loved you. They left because you were no longer useful to them. I walked away without looking back, but I could hear him crying softly behind me. 3 years later, I stood in the same hotel ballroom where Meridian Dynamics had announced my promotion to VP. But this time, I was the one making the announcement. Marcus had officially retired, and the board had unanimously voted to make me CEO, the youngest female CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Victoria, now 78 but still sharp as ever, sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Beside her sat my new husband, David Kim, a brilliant patent attorney I had met at a technology conference. Unlike my father, David understood that a strong woman didn't need to be diminished in order to make him feel important. 5 years ago, I told the assembled crowd of investors, employees, and media, I was fired from my first job for supposedly being unable to meet expectations. Today, Meridian Dynamics has become the largest manufacturing company in the Midwest, with revenue exceeding $2 billion annually. The applause was thunderous, but I wasn't finished. Success isn't about where you start, I continued. It's about what you do when you're knocked down. It's about who believes in you when you don't believe in yourself. And it's about building something that will outlast any personal grievances or family drama. After the ceremony, as I mingled with guests and accepted congratulations, I spotted a familiar figure near the back of the room. My father, looking older and more frail than when I had last seen him, was standing alone by the bar. He caught my eye and raised his glass slightly in what might have been a toast or an acknowledgement. I nodded back, not unkindly, but without warmth. He was part of my past now, not my future. Victoria appeared at my elbow, following my gaze. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Any of it?" I thought about the question seriously. Did I regret the years of planning and calculating? Did I regret the systematic destruction of my father's company? Did I regret choosing victory over forgiveness? No, I said finally. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that they forced me to become someone capable of such calculated revenge. But I don't regret the outcome. Victoria squeezed my arm. Your mother would understand. She was gentle, but she was not weak. She would want you to claim everything that belongs to you. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself standing alone on the hotel's balcony, looking out over the city lights. Chicago stretched before me, a million possibilities twinkling in the darkness. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Congratulations on your success. I hope you're happy." I typed back, "I am, thank you." And for the first time in my entire life, both lives, that was completely true. I was Sarah Chen, CEO of Meridian Dynamics, wife to a man who loved and respected me, granddaughter to a woman who had built an empire and passed its lessons on to me. I had a corner office on the 40th floor, a salary that would have been unimaginable to the broken young woman who had died in a car accident 6 years ago, and a future limited only by my own ambition. More than that, I had justice. Not the petty satisfaction of watching enemies suffer, but the deeper justice of seeing merit rewarded and loyalty honored. I had built something magnificent from the ashes of my former life, and in doing so, I had proven that sometimes the best revenge isn't dish served cold. It's a life lived so well that your enemies become irrelevant. The wind picked up, carrying with it the sounds of the city below. Somewhere out there, Linda was probably still looking for her next wealthy husband. Jessica was probably still convinced that her failures were someone else's fault, and my father was probably still regretting choices that couldn't be unmade. But none of that mattered anymore. I had won not just the game they had forced me to play, but the larger game of building a life worth living. I had taken their worst and turned it into my best. I pulled out my phone and called Victoria. "Are you ready for the next phase?" I asked when she answered. "What did you have in mind?" I smiled, watching a plane blink its way across the star-filled sky. "I was thinking about expanding internationally, maybe starting with Asia. I think it's time to show them what happens when you invest in the right people." Victoria's laugh was rich and delighted. "My dear girl, I thought you'd never ask." As I hung up and headed back inside to rejoin my husband and the last few guests, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from a job well done.